Whatever you want.
Okay, I'll say whatever you want. Okay, guys, I have a small request though. Can you guys hear me? Yes. I can't. Is there no medical students here? There's one medical student. I'm just okay. Then I'm gonna teach it our level then because I'm gonna zoom through the first part because there's no med students. This was just a brief overview of what upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron definition was, that whatever is before the anterior horn as upper motor and whatever is after that to your muscle supply as your lower motor neuron. And any problems about that is your upper motor neuron lesions involving the brain and the spinal cord. And whatever is after that comes the lower motor neuron problems. This was for the med students, but I'm going to skip this one since we all know this. Oh, hold on. Okay, wait. So what is spasticity? So this comes from the Greek word, it's called spasmos, meaning pull or drag. And it's clinically defined as velocity dependent. Like when you like pull it out, it's velocity dependent.
Sorry.
Velocity dependent resistance to stretch, where lack of inhibition results in excessive contraction because all the inhibition comes from the upper motor neuron, one from the cortical as well as from the upper centers. I'll go into deep into that later. Excessive contraction of the muscles, ultimately leading to hyperreflexia or overly flexed joints, like we see here often. It is also referred to as muscle unusual tightness or stiffness or pull of muscles. So basic physiology, we know that all the input comes from the skin, like when you do the flex reflex, the Babinski musculoskeletal system, the spindle muscles, all the receptors in the muscles. This leads to activation of the stretch reflex, and the final result in the motor response. And all of this information, like we all know, goes to cerebellum, somatosensory cortex, basal ganglia, and they're modified there before they go into the lower motor neuron. And that's how we get the motor response. Quickly here, I have put in, just to revise, here's the pyramidal tracks. They've basically discussed a lot about pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracks, lateral corticospinal and the anterior corticospinal here, and the extrapyramidal, including the reticulospinal, olivospinal, vestibulospinal. So like this slide is just about telling that all of this information coming from the upper higher centers get modified before they reach the lower motor neuron, and sometimes they reach what we call as the interneurons, which are very important in regulation of those reflexes and movements. So spasticity, it comes because there is prolonged disinhibition of the spinal reflexes as a result of upper motor neuron lesions. And normally they have discussed about stretch reflex, extensor reflexes. These are all the spinal reflexes that we know of, and they're always under the supraspinal control. And it can be either inhibitory or excitatory, and they have their own effects. So the stretch reflex, it can be either phasic or tonic. The phasic is like when you're doing a deep tendon reflex, that's the phasic one. The tonic one is when you have a sustained muscle, like pull, stretch, that's the tonic one that the book is about. And most of the time, it's the stretch, the tonic stretch that is involved in the pathophysiology of spasticity. So one more thing I'll come discuss later is like if you have the pyramidal tract, the corticospinal line, we all know that that can cause upper motor neuron. But the weakness or the it causes more of a weakness rather than spasticity. It's morely the involvement of the extrapyramidal tract that causes spasticity. Here we all know this is a basic thing. You hit it here for your dependent knee reflexes. It senses it here, senses it to the posterior, and then comes to the anterior alpha motor neurons, from where they send the message here to contract the quadriceps here. And also another part of it goes to the upper cortical centers, higher cortical centers. So again and again, it's going to come again that it's because of the loss of the descending facilitatory inhibitory influences. Normally you have an inhibitory influence and an excitatory influence. So if you take out the inhibitory, it's going to be too excited and it's going to be too contracted. And this also acts through what's called the alpha inhibitory interneurons here. They are also responsible for the inhibition of the antagonist muscles, because if you want to flex your arm, you're going to use your flexors. The other one is going to be relaxed, the extensors. It's I think called the Sherrington blow of reciprocal inhibition. We use it in the eye also, sometimes you use that. So if you have an injury to the upper CNS part, or if there's an injury to the CNS, the interneuron is unable to shut off its antagonist firing muscles, and that's one of the big reasons that causes resultant increased velocity-dependent resistance to the movement. That's one big thing that you want to know to identify between spasticity and rigidity, is that spasticity is always velocity-dependent and rigidity is not. So 3 things to remember about spasticity is the absence of the upper motor neuron inhibitory control on the spinal reflex. Number 2 is because there are hyperactive stretch reflex. They're mediated by the spindle stretch receptors. And another one is this very low threshold of the alpha motor neurons, because the inhibition has been taken out. Here's some few key points. Again, it's because of chronic stretch reflexes. It's mediated by the 1A efferents and the muscle spindle. It's velocity dependent, like how fast you pull it. It's dynamic. When they say dynamic, they discuss more about, say, if you're in the resting muscle tone and you pull out the muscle, it doesn't go back. But sometimes if you pull it out and you're spastic, it can still continue to have that hyperreflexia. And it's also length dependent. This is just what I just mentioned, the difference between rigidity and spasticity. This we all know why we have upper motor neuron lesions. It was more for the med students here. So this is an article I found out. This is very old. It's 2002, but this is the best article I could find. They've discussed a lot about upper motor neuron syndromes here, and they're divided into negative signs and positive signs. Positive is what we're dealing with today. Negative is like you had an acute one, so you're weak and there's loss of dexterity, like just after a stroke. Positive signs are the one like muscle overactivity, contraction. It's more of this, it includes all of this, like hyperactive tendon reflexes, clonus, flexor spasms, class knife phenomenon, flexion and extensor spasms, Babinski sign, and spastic dystonia. And they've given 3 theories why you have these positive symptoms. The first one is abnormal processing of the spinal reflex. They have contributed to a lot of the positive signs. Second are the efferent drives. So this is a little bit different. I think there are intrinsic efferent drives that comes from the higher CNS that causes this, other than just the spinal reflexes. And the third one is the various disorders of voluntary muscle movements. They have decided to group it into 3 groups, so that because the treatment differs in all of these groups. Dystonia and associated reactions, they said that associated reactions are the ones like, suppose you have hemiplegia on your right leg, and when you walk, you tend to kind of hold, like flex your arm on the side to help you balance, and that's what they said was the associated reactions. The stretch reflex is what we do, the deep tendon reflexes, nociceptive as like when you step on a pin or a nail, then that's a nociceptive stimuli. You tend to like flex away from it. Those are the spinal reflexes. And the cutaneous, like we all know, the Babinski is the one that do all the time. This is repeating the whole thing again. I'll just simplify it. It depends on the supraspinal inhibitory and the excitatory fibers again. And most of the effect that we normally think is that if your pyramidal fibers is affected, that's going to cause spasticity, but that's not the case. It causes more of weakness and clumsiness rather than spasticity. Spasticity is more involved with extrapyramidal fibers. They call it parapyramidal fibers in the olden days, but it's the extrapyramidal fibers. When they are involved, it causes more problems with the spasticity. So going deep a little bit, they mentioned about the most important tract that causes this, the inhibition of the spinal reflex. That's a dorsal reticulospinal tract, which arises in the ventral reticular formation. Most of them arise from the midbrain, but that's why sometimes people with spinal problems have more of hyperreflexia than people with cortical problems, cortical lesions. And this runs very close to your corticospinal tract, the pyramidal tract, and they have a very small contribution to spasticity. Then there's also the excitatory pathways, which excited this arises more from the bulbopontin tegmentum, and they descend in the medial reticulospinal tract here. And there's also vestibulospinal fibers here from the vestibular nucleus. It comes down, and this is also another that's excitatory pathway, but this is not very important. So there's always a balance between the excitatory and the inhibitory part, and if that balance is off, like if the excitatory inhibitory parts goes away, then that's when you end up with excessive hyperactivity, excitatory activity, and end up with spasticity. It's being recorded.
Huh?
It's being recorded. So there are other motor areas of the cortex that facilitate this inhibitory drive down to the spinal cord. So when you have a lesion of the spinal, like corticobulbar fibers, as well as cortical lesions, that also causes reduced inhibitory drive and excitation of the spinal cord activity. But like I said, the one that involved most, like if you involve the dorsal reticulospinal fibers, that's the one that causes the max spasticity. Here they've discussed a little bit about why you find different things in different clinical settings, like you have a spinal cord lesion that's partial and destroy the inhibitory fibers, but preserve the excitatory fibers. There would be the spinal activity would be very hyperactive. But if you have a complete spinal cord lesion, that will affect both your inhibitory and excitatory fibers, and you lose all the supraspinal control and become hyperactive. Also, all this hyperactivities also depends upon where the location is. So you can find different types of lesions with different types of hyperactivity. Other than this mechanism, the pathophysiology, you should also remember the biomechanical changes, meaning the tissues, the joints, if not used for a long time, can lead to contraction that can also cause weakness, not only because of the lesion, but also not because you're not using it. And spasticity also because you have muscle overactivity. So it leads to all these changes like stiffness, hypertonia. This can ultimately lead to contracture, reduced range of motion, and impair the function and lifestyle of the patient. A quick summary here, upper motor neurons can be both muscle overactivity as well as weakness. First of all, because your corticospinal as well as extrapyramidal fibers are involved, this can cause immobilization, biomechanical changes, and that can reduce ROM and abnormal posture and hence impaired function. So other than that, this is just a brief pictures from some lecture that I saw. This is an adducted internally rotated shoulder here. This is a flexed wrist here, the pronated arm, the flexed elbow here, thumb in the palm deformity that you see in spasticity here. This is a striatal toe, the flexed knee and the adducted thighs. So they sometimes use the Ashworth scale or the spasm scoring scale for spasticity. These are the brief consequences. As we all know, we see very frequently here in our patients, skin breakdown, interfering with your breathing, like you're transferring from the bed to your chair, normal daily activities. These are the treatment. I think this is one thing that we can quickly go through. You can try benzodiazepines. This binds to the existing GABA, to the GABA A receptors, and they are found in high concentration in the reticular formation and polysynaptic spinal tracts. The problem with the efficiency is that it can help with your pain, hyperreflexia, and passive range of motion, but it causes sedation, depression, confusion, etc. You can try baclofen. This stops the release of substance P and excitatory neurotransmitters. Tizanidine, I haven't read a comparison between baclofen and tizanidine, but looks like some patients prefer tizanidine. It's an alpha adrenergic agonist, and you can it works by reducing the excitatory amino acid transmitters in the spinal interneurons. But like I said, it can also cause sedation, hypertension. All of this should be taken into consideration. Baclofen, we see often people with baclofen pumps come into the hospital. Dantrolene, I don't think we ever use it here. I've hardly used it in the ICU once, or maybe for fever treatment, but not for this. This is a very good thing that I found. We can just click a copy of this and keep it because we see spasticity all the time. Oh, you guys are a little late. Sorry. Diazepam 2 milligrams, then Dantrolene, baclofen. I think we use clonidine to. I think if gabapentin is something we can try too in the clinics and stuff. But we haven't gone to this that often for treatment. You can do local injections. So one new thing that I read was the phenol block. I have never heard of this. I was in a PMNR lecture that they use carbolic acid and this causes demyelination. So for at least 3 to 6 months, it causes Waldron regeneration and makes it like weak. So it helps in the spasticity. You can have a lot of swelling in the area. You can get Botox injection. It's good because it can be more focal, but if you have like a huge area of spasticity, that becomes challenging. And once you inject it, it should not be re-injected before 90 days. I don't know if it's related to the antibody thing. Surgical management, so you can do an intrathecal baclofen pump. You can directly inject it into the subarachnoid space here and then leave this pump implanted under the skin. You have fewer side effects from this because they're not circulating in your bloodstream. However, sometimes they can have severe side effects like you can have weakness, nausea, it can get infected, altered mental status. Sometimes the pump doesn't work and it starts baclofen withdrawal. Also, other advantages to look at it, like it can be adjusted to whatever dose you like. It's not going to the systemic blood system. That's mine.
Oops. I thought this was a public continent.
Neurosurgery. So when do you call them? If you have severe painful spasticity, it's irreversible. They do something called dorsal root rhizotomies here. I don't know how they do it, but they said that it cuts the dorsal cords and the gray matter, and this is because this track carries the excitatory signals from the muscle to the spinal cord and the descending inhibitory input. So this is one option you can try, and most of the time it's been tried in patients with mostly children with spastic diplegic and cerebral palsy. Other things, these are more common than the dorsal rhizotomies that are done in neurosurgery. They are the target tissues are they focus more on the bones, ligaments, tendons, and do different types of surgery to help like improve in their spasticity, the range of motion for the patient, like tendon lengthening, tendon transfer, like split anterior tibial to common procedures, osteotomy for skeletal deformity, and arthrodesis like joint fusion. I'm not sure where you would do the joint fusion. Joint fusion. So other than that, most of our stroke patients, they all go through this physical modalities. You keep stretches, positioning, relaxation. These are all the other methods that can try to help them in the physiotherapy management.
The dog?
Wait, I'm not.
Wait. 18 minutes. This is like a record, right?
It's better than what you did last week. Is that recorded? Yeah.
Wait. Oh, shoot. Sorry. You can delete the last portion, right? Of course.
Okay. It's been a recording lecture, but I can show you things. The basic things to remember is that it's all about spasticity. A lot of spasticity in our patients. The two fibers, corticospinal fibers, the pyramidal fibers, and extrapyramidal fibers. There's excitatory and inhibitory fibers. So when you have inhibitory fibers, if you take them off, everything is excited, and your muscles contract, and that causes spasticity. That's what you take away from this lecture. You can't take off anything. And because there is too much excitation in the spinal fibers, that causes all the hyperreflexia. What are the signs of upper motor neuron lesions?
Hyperreflexia from the reflexes and then positive intensity.
Spasticity.
And tell me 6 differences.
You just watch the lecture again.
You should watch the lecture again.
Yeah.